everyone, John here. We've got an awesome interview today. I'm excited about this one. Joining me today is a man with a very impressive resume. He started off his career playing in the Duke Ellington Band under the direction of Mercer Ellington. He has played with Bon Jovi, Bruce Springsteen, Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan, Slide Hampton, and many other great musicians.
Can't laugh, can't be made to laugh.
Oh my God.
Well, what?
Recently, he has been playing with the Spirit of Life Ensemble, and he has served as their leader for many years. He's toured all over the world, in countries like France, Japan, Australia, and even Estonia. You name it, he's been there. Welcome, Bob Ferrel.
Awesome, John, good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Appreciate the interview, this is awesome.
You've played with a lot of great musicians. How do you find it helps to interact with your peers in the music industry?
Oh, it's great. I mean, it's an honor. Fortunately, I've met so many great trombonists. One night at New York at Sweet Basil, we're there, and I was hanging out with the great Ted Kurson, who was on my third CD, who was such a great inspiration to me. What a great friend, played with Mingus and Eric Dolphy and Cecil Taylor. But one night he goes, "Yeah, Albert's here." And I'm like, "Albert who?" And he goes, "Albert Mangelsdorf." And man, I almost dropped my trombone. Ended up playing a set with Albert Mangelsdorf, you know. It was phenomenal. Other times when I was in just after high school, I was playing in my other teacher's pro band, and Slide Hampton walks out and plays with us, you know, and I got to talk with him, and just wonderful. I'd always respect the elder player. These guys are constant inspirations to me. I still have my idols, and I try to get all of my students to have idols. I noticed that a lot of younger students are not listening as much as they used to. You know, I only had about 7 records or 8 records, but I at the beginning, but I listened to them intensely. Now people have on their iPod 10,000 songs, but they only listen to a couple songs. I just try to let everybody know how everything that I've done so far is because of all the listening that I did and that I still do. I always listen to everybody that's new, and all the masters, and just constant listening. You know, it's the only way to learn.
Right. Now, for those of you who don't know, Albert Mangelsdorf is a multiphonics specialist. That's playing 2 notes or more at the same time. Now, Bob, you also do a lot of multiphonics. Oh,
sure. Now, I did multiphonics with my teacher, my classical teacher, Ray, because in the back of the Cornetti book, which was my first intermediate method book, which I love, I looked in the back and it said simultaneous chords. So, you know, my teacher goes, "Oh, it's this." Plays a B flat, he sang a high D, and the F popped out. And I was mesmerized. I mean, you know, I fell apart. I met Mangelsdorf 2 times in Germany on tour with the Duke Ellington Orchestra. We were actually on the same concert venues, and actually one night they had to switch the Ellington band with another band, and we went on right before Albert in Olympia Hall in Munich, this huge, where they had the Olympics, huge, massive building. And I got to go out and play with the Ellington band. I had a solo, horns and minor, and I would play multiphonics at the end. And I threw in everything I had in front of this massive audience in Munich, his hometown, his home base, and these people were screaming for me. I was 19, it was amazing. And I was walking off the stage and I saw Albert and I said, "Albert, how you doing?" You know, and he wouldn't shake my hand. I think I got him upset, you know. but I just, you know, I mean, I kind of threw him a little bit. But later, 25 years later at Sweet Basil, I got a picture of us shaking hands, you know, and he was totally cool. So, but he's my idol. I mean, just wonderful. Nobody could really do multiphonics like him. Yeah, he was a genius.
At Jukubox, we're very much about teachers and students.
Yes.
Now, people think that teachers do all the teaching, but often students can be the teachers. Do you find that you're inspired by your students?
I'm always inspired by my students. I think it's, first off, I love teaching. It's great working with everybody. And I have some students that are 55 years old, and I learn from them, constantly. But yes, it's a learning process, watching them grow. And like some of my famous students that have inspired me to study new music. I have a great Hungarian student now living in the U.S. that can play the Carnival of Venice on trombone, and I hadn't really studied that piece, and I said, if he can play it, I'm going to play it. So, I mean, yes, it can go both ways, and that's the fun part. And then somebody, if they're improvising some cool stuff, I'll certainly incorporate it in my playing. We're like sponges. We have to, thrive off each other. Mm-hmm.
Right. There's often a debate about if private lessons are necessary. Why not just teach yourself the instrument? Why do you believe that private lessons are necessary?
Oh, they're totally necessary. And when I grew up in Bloomfield, New Jersey, if you wanted to be in the marching band, you had to take private lessons. So the private lesson, everybody was taking private lessons. You need private lessons to go. I mean, there's certain players that will just play in band and have fun and not study with anybody. And that experience, they go through high school, and that's a great experience, and that's the standard experience. But for those who really want to get more involved and really understand, you have to have a private instructor. I mean, to me, that's the most important thing, and they just improve so much faster. And it has to be done that way, yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. So, at one point in your life, you were a student. How did you go from being a beginner to going all the places you did in your career?
Well, with my teacher right away in 7th grade, I auditioned for a junior region band. And I made, I think, 3rd chair. The next year I made 1st chair, and at that point my parents got me a professional horn like my 3rd year of playing, very early. Mm-hmm. They could see that something was going on. And through all that study and then all the all-states and regions and competitions and touring like with the high school band, like on our little band trips and stuff, I had no idea that like a year after high school, I'd be on a tour bus with the Ellington Orchestra traveling all over the world. And
it's amazing.
Yeah, so I was, I really wanted that, and I loved all the big bands, Tommy Dorsey, Glenn Miller. I really studied them, and my dream was to play in a big band, and the opportunity came up very quickly, and I was prepared, and I jumped on it. I did not want to miss it.
How did that opportunity come up?
Oh, it was funny. I was at a friend's house in Bloomfield, a bass player, and we had a jam session. Mm-hmm. So we're just jamming at his house like any kids after high school, whatever, having fun after school. And no, I'd been out. So anyway, we're jamming out there having a rehearsal, and the phone rings. Mm-hmm. So not cell phones. The landline rings, and my friend's playing bass, so he's hooked up, and he goes, "Bobby, get the phone." So I said, "Of course." I pick up the phone, and it says, "Hi, is Bob Ferrel there?" Mm-hmm. This is Mercer Ellington, Duke Ellington's son. And I said, "Jimmy, what is this? I thought it was my brother." And he goes, "No, this is Mercer Ellington." I said, "Jimmy, what do you want? I mean, what does Mom want?" I thought she was looking for me. And he goes, "No." He starts laughing because he knew I would believe it. I thought it was my brother fooling around. And he goes, "Well, listen, this is Mercer Ellington. You could call me at 212." And I started writing the number down. I said, "Oh, you're serious?" And he goes, "Yeah, I called your mom. She said to call you at this number." Man, it was just a gift to be able to, and I respected that gig so much. I knew how important it was. I knew how famous the band was. I had seen the band a year before, so I had already seen. I was like totally impressed. And I get on the tour bus, and the first person sitting there is Cootie Williams, who was very famous. Cootie Williams had Charlie Parker and Bud Powell in his band, and he was like a grandfather to us all. He was a sweet gentleman, and he traveled all over. We played at the Sydney Opera House. Mm-hmm. And I was 19, and I did that same multiphonic solo there, and I had to come out for. I have to brag, but I had to come out for 3 bows. I mean, and I have it on cassette now on CD. But man, it was just such a great experience. Yeah. It was, But I couldn't have done any of that if I didn't have private lessons with my teacher and my secondary teacher. I had a jazz teacher my senior year who was a big guy, a big bass trombone player, and played on Broadway and all the shows and all around. And But if I hadn't studied all that stuff, I never could have done it, you know.
Yeah. So how did Mercer Ellington find out about you?
Oh, there was a friend of mine who now is a doctor, a saxophone player, and his friend was in the band. They were both from Detroit, and they had changed about 3 or 4 lead trombone players, I think, within 2 years. He was just going through them pretty quickly because Mercer was tough and he didn't fool around. And they just said they needed a trombone player. The guy made the reference, and I was shocked. I mean, I'm still shocked over it. And that led to so many great things because once I had that resume, you know, and on my resume that I played with the Ellington Orchestra, then that led to a lot of other things and, you know, opened a lot of doors for me as well. And plus, it was just an honor.
Right. So I guess that's why having connections is so important because these people refer you to Mercer Ellington. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. You got. Well, I was out playing a lot of jam. I was going to all the jam sessions, and I had started my own band and was doing a lot of gigs around. And I used to see Bill Watrous play in West Patterson at a small club called Gulliver's, and they would have, you know, Chet Baker, Woody Shaw, everybody played in here. But I saw Bill play there all the time. And then, you know, after high school, a year later, I'm playing on the same stage. The guy gave me a break. You know, he let me come in. Amos Kahn, very great booking agent, you know. He actually even booked Sonny Rollins and John Coltrane in his club in Clifton years ago. So, you know, just one thing led to another. But you have to be persistent, and I'm still studying. I'm constantly studying new music, studying Renaissance now. I'm studying the sackbut music and as much new jazz as possible. It's a constant thing, you know. As much as I teach, I still study. You know, it's
right.
That process is still going on.
Right, it's so important to make connections, keep studying, and learn new things all the time.
Sure, and be open. You got to be open and listen and, you know, hear what's going on and ready to jump, you know. And always thank your first teacher, because I mean, you know, whoever is the most important, gets you started musically and focused and all levels, whatever, you know, styles you're into, and it's very important.
You've had a very successful performance career as well as the teaching career. So what advice would you give to people these days who want to be performers?
Well, I have two things. Anybody that's going to go into music that I teach, I would say if they want to go into performance, only go into performance if they're really practicing 2 to 3 hours a day and they're totally absorbed and totally really want to do that, you know. Otherwise, if they really love music, and I think it's great that they should get their music education degree and practice as if they're going for performance.
So this room we're in, you should consider opening up as a museum. Why don't you? I'm wondering what this is back here.
Oh, that's one of my favorite trombones. That a lot of people think it is a sackbut or a sackbut, but it is actually a trombone, a copy from 1825. They were popular in Europe. Really used for military bands, like, you know, maybe they'd have guys on horseback, you know, maybe 6 horses coming down the street in full regalia playing these Buccin trombone. It's called a Buccin, and Buccin is Latin for, like, I think animal or dragon heads and stuff. And there were a lot of Buccin instruments in the 1800s. They had Russian bassoons that had like monster heads on them, and it was very popular. And those dragon heads actually go back to antiquity, to the Romans and to Egypt. They had big, like large poles with these big dragon heads that they go into battle and, you know, make charge noises. My room here, I've always had I call it the music room, and I've always had a music room. My first music room was in Bloomfield in the basement. You know, had my little Edison lab set up and some, you know, mice, my little pets, and and it's developed into, you know, I just have my artifacts, different CDs, and, you know, pictures and posters from my victories of gigs, you know, gigs or victories, you know, and all that in the corner, all backstage passes from. I mean, each pass is a great concert and a great memory, you know.
Yeah.
So, and I like to have all this stuff out, so when the students are here, they can look around and be involved in stuff that I've done my whole life, and you know, and plus I can tell stories, and they can, you know, hear about what life on the road was like, and you know, stuff like that.
Right. It really is like a museum. You can make some good money off of it.
I should charge.
We are in your phonograph room
Yes.
at the moment. On your CD Time Tunnel, you actually record the first portion of the album in a traditional studio. But the last 3 tunes were recorded on a phonograph.
Yes.
Why go back 100 years in terms of production values?
Well, this is just sharing with everybody a passion that I've had of collecting phonographs, and I've always been a fan of Thomas Edison, and I went to the Edison Museum when I was in the 5th grade, and it really wowed me. But the most important thing of that trip was going to the Phonograph Room and hearing phonographs. I remember the first record I heard at the Edison Museum, it was called Barney Google, and I have 3 or 4 copies of that record. And so I just have a passion for collecting phonographs, and then later I discovered that I could record on them. And we would take these original brown wax cylinders from 1895, and they were moldy. We'd shave them and put a recording device on and acoustically just stand in front of the horn and play and make an acoustic recording. All the very first records, recordings were all acoustic recording. Electric recording came out later. See how important the horn is. And they also used to use these little tubes back then, hearing tubes.
Oh, those were headphones.
Headphones, exactly. Sweet sound. And you know, when you listen to these records, it's his sound autograph into this. And the presence of sound compared to CDs is so much flatter. You can just feel the vibration of the soloist. You know, it's just amazing how much presence comes out of these old records.
As a phonograph enthusiast, collector of sackbuts and Renaissance instruments, international jazz and rock trombonist, as well as a private teacher for dozens of talented students. There is so much we can learn from musicians like Bob Ferrel. I would like to thank Mr. Ferrel for sharing his experiences and insight with us today. For more Bob Ferrel, be sure to check out his YouTube page at youtube.com/Bob Ferrel. Or you could take lessons with him right here at Jukubox, the ultimate online music lesson network. I'm Jon Schwarz for Jukubox. Thanks for watching.